They say rock bottom teaches you lessons the mountaintop never will. But what they don't tell you is that sometimes the people who push you off the edge are the same ones who swore they loved you. My name is Camila. And once upon a time I thought love was enough to hold a man's heart. I thought loyalty, patience, and the kind of devotion that makes you lose pieces of yourself would be rewarded. That if I just held on long enough, he'd see me. He'd choose me. He'd stay. But all he ever did was leave. We met during our second year of college. I was studying marketing, juggling part-time jobs, sleeping 4 hours a night just to afford my textbooks. Bryce, was different. Confident. He had the kind of charm that made rooms hush when he walked in. And for some reason he noticed me. I didn't come from much. My father left when I was 6. My mom worked herself into exhaustion just to keep the lights on. But Bryce made me feel like I could finally stop surviving. He said I was the only real one in his life. That everyone else wanted something from him, status, money, the image. But I was different. And I gave him everything. While he chased dreams of being a music producer, I worked extra shifts to help with his equipment. When he couldn't make rent, I covered it, even if it meant eating ramen for weeks. I edited his proposals, built his brand from scratch, pitched him to potential clients. I was his girl, his backbone, the one behind the curtain making everything run. Until one day, I wasn't. He started coming home late if he came at all. There were whispers, DMs from girls, sudden meetings that didn't make sense. But I told myself he was just stressed. That success was coming, and this was the storm before the calm. Then came the night everything changed. I had saved for weeks to buy him a vintage record he'd been talking about since we met. I left work early, took the train across town, stood in line, and surprised him at his studio. But when I walked in, he wasn't alone. She was everything I wasn't: polished, sultry, designer from head to toe. Her laughter filled the room like it belonged there. And Bryce? He wasn't even surprised to see me. Just annoyed. He pulled me aside like I was some embarrassing interruption. "Cam, what are you doing here?" "What am I doing here?" I held out the gift. "I thought we could. We talked about this. You can't just show up like this. We haven't talked in days, Bryce." He glanced back at the girl, then whispered through clenched teeth, "You're making this weird." I didn't cry. Not there. Not in front of her. I handed him the record, whispered, "You're welcome," and walked out. The next morning his relationship status changed on Facebook. He didn't choose me. Not the girl who stood by him when he had nothing. Not the woman who believed in his dream more than he did. He chose spotlight. Image. Convenience. He chose her. And I chose silence. But inside I promised myself something. I wouldn't beg. I wouldn't break. I would rebuild. He didn't want me when I was ordinary. So I'd become extraordinary. And one day, he'd have no choice but to see everything he threw away. They say the best revenge is success. But no one talks about the silence between the pain and the progress. When you're sitting alone with nothing but your grief, your broken pride, and a choice. Stay shattered or start over. After Bryce humiliated me, I disappeared from everything that had his fingerprints on it. I blocked him on every platform. Unfollowed all the mutual friends who couldn't wait to post him and his new girl like a trophy they all saw coming. It wasn't just the betrayal. It was how easily he erased me, like I'd been a placeholder, not a partner. I wasn't just heartbroken. I was humiliated. And I still had bills to pay. The studio I helped him set up? I'd co-signed the lease. He stopped paying. I was left with the debt. The landlord didn't care about broken hearts or betrayal. I worked double shifts at the bookstore and picked up extra hours tutoring to cover it. My dreams of graduating on time? Slipping away with every late-night bus ride and skipped meal. But pain has a way of clarifying purpose. And somewhere in that storm something inside me hardened, not bitter but focused. I'd spent so much of my life helping others build their dreams. It was time I built mine. I scraped together what I could and enrolled in a late-night digital marketing course. It wasn't much, but it was mine. I studied during my breaks. I watched tutorials instead of scrolling social media. I rebuilt my resume, revamped my LinkedIn, and pitched myself to small businesses as a branding consultant. The first client paid me in gift cards. The second gave me $200. The third told her friends. And suddenly I was booked. I'd work at the bookstore from 7 to 3, tutor from 4 to 6, then dive into client work until 2 a.m. I didn't sleep. I barely ate. But I had purpose. Still, the nights were the hardest. Lying in bed, exhausted, wondering if I'd ever be seen, not as someone's assistant, someone's ex, someone's convenience, but as someone who mattered, who deserved more than crumbs. And just when I thought I couldn't carry any more, I got sick. Doctor said it was stress. My immune system was fried. He told me to slow down, but I couldn't afford to. I had no backup, no partner, no family swooping in to help. I took the antibiotics, wrapped myself in an extra blanket and kept working. I remember sitting on the floor one night, my laptop overheating, my eyes burning, and whispering to myself, "You're not done yet. You're not done until you make it impossible for them to forget you." That became my mantra. I started documenting my journey online. Not the heartbreak, just the grind. Tips for small businesses, tutorials, before and after branding makeovers. My voice wasn't polished, but it was real. And people noticed. One day, a small women-owned skincare brand reposted one of my designs. The post went viral. Overnight, I gained 10,000 followers. Then 30,000. Clients started reaching out to me instead of the other way around. I upgraded from free templates to building my own. From editing on a cracked laptop to investing in a real workspace. From calling myself a freelancer to founding my own creative agency. I named it Rise Creative, because that's what I did. I rose. By year 2, I had 6 employees, clients across 4 countries, and had been featured in 2 online magazines. My story wasn't a headline, but it was whispered in rooms I used to dream about entering. And still, he never reached out. Not Bryce. Not the girl he left me for. But I saw them. On the fringes of my algorithm. His music never took off. The last post I saw from him was a video begging people to support real artists, with less than 500 views. Poetic, really. The man who didn't want me when I had nothing, now had nothing to offer the world that didn't revolve around someone else. But that's not what I held on to. I held on to me. To the version of myself I uncovered through the rubble. The woman who learned she didn't need saving. The woman who learned how to show up for herself even when no one else did. They didn't break me. They revealed me. And the world finally started paying attention. You'd think that after everything, seeing him again would make me angry. Or bitter. Or hurt. But when it finally happened, what I felt surprised even me. Nothing. It had been 3 years. 3 long, messy, beautiful years of rebuilding myself from the ground up. My business, Rise Creative, had grown beyond anything I imagined. I was speaking on panels now, hosting workshops, collaborating with global brands that once felt light years out of reach. I had a team, a vision, and peace. Real bone-deep peace. Then came the email. It was from an event coordinator I'd worked with once before. A creative tech summit in the city was looking for panelists. Branding, storytelling, digital strategy. "You're the perfect fit," she wrote. I skimmed the lineup and froze when I saw his name. Bryce Mercer, audio branding consultant. I stared at the screen for a long time. Apparently, he'd rebranded himself. He was no longer the indie singer-songwriter with dreams of stardom. Now he was helping brands develop their audio identity, whatever that meant. His website was sleek. His bio full of buzzwords. But I knew the truth. He hadn't grown. He had just pivoted. And now he'd be sitting across from me on a stage pretending none of it had ever happened. I almost declined. Almost. But then I remembered who I was now. And I smiled. The day of the summit, I wore the same color lipstick he once told me was too bold. Red. The kind of red that makes people stare. My hair slicked back, power heels clicking across marble floors as I walked into the venue with my assistant beside me. Bryce was already there. He was setting up near the sound booth, talking too loudly to the tech crew, clearly trying to sound important. I caught his eye from across the room. His face went blank for a second, like he couldn't believe what he was seeing. Then he smiled. The same smile he used to charm his way out of everything. "Eliza," he said, stepping toward me. I nodded. "Bryce." He hesitated, then extended his hand. I took it, briefly businesslike. He looked like he wanted to say more. Maybe an apology. Maybe a lame joke about how much had changed. But I didn't give him the chance. "I'm on in 10, I said coolly. "See you on the panel." The session began. The room was packed. Cameras rolling. People taking notes. I didn't talk about heartbreak. I talked about legacy. About building a brand when no one believes in you. About carving a space in a world that doesn't always see women, especially women of color, as leaders. I spoke like I had nothing to prove because I didn't. I was already living the proof. When the moderator asked about our biggest business lesson, Bryce tried to sound profound. He said, "Never underestimate the power of partnerships. The right partner can change everything." Then he looked at me. I smiled. "And sometimes," I said calmly, "losing the wrong partner is the best thing that can ever happen to you." The crowd laughed. A few people clapped. Bryce's jaw tensed. After the panel, people rushed up to ask questions. I handed out cards, took selfies, promised to connect on LinkedIn. I saw Bryce linger near the door, unsure whether to approach. Eventually he did. "You really made something of yourself," he said quietly. "I did," I replied. "I'm sorry for how things ended." "I'm not," I said. He blinked. "Because if you hadn't ended things the way you did," I continued, "I might still be building someone else's dream instead of living mine." He looked stunned. Maybe even a little ashamed. I didn't stay to comfort him. I had a dinner meeting to attend. With a client who flew in just to see me. A woman who once watched her business get ripped off by a former partner. Until she heard my story and hired me to tell hers. That was the power I had now. My voice. My truth. As I walked away from Bryce that day, I realized something important. My story wasn't about him anymore. Never really was. He was just the chapter that taught me how to stop begging for value from people who couldn't see mine. The rest of the story? That was mine to write. It was funny in a twisted kind of way how life had brought us full circle. Only this time I wasn't the girl sitting on the couch begging for his attention. I was the one people stood in line to meet. I didn't expect to see Bryce again after the summit. I thought that was it, our final chapter. But life, as always, had one more lesson to teach me. A few weeks after the panel, I got an email. It was long. Rambling. The kind of message that felt like it had been written and rewritten a dozen times. It was from Bryce. He said he'd been following my work. That the summit made him reflect on a lot. That he realized how much he took me for granted. Not just as a partner but as a person. He admitted he felt threatened by my ambition back then. That he thought if I got too successful he'd get left behind. So instead he left first. "I see now how wrong I was," he wrote. "I was trying to win the world's approval while ignoring the one person who truly believed in me. And now you're out there thriving. While I'm still searching for meaning." I read the email twice. Not because I was emotional. But because it sounded like a man who was finally ready to see what he lost. But by then I had already found myself. I didn't respond. Because I didn't owe him closure. I had given myself that a long time ago. Still, the timing of his message couldn't have been more ironic. That very weekend, I was set to deliver my keynote at a global women's empowerment conference in New York City. One of the keynote speakers? A world-famous fashion mogul. Another? A former First Lady. And me, Eliza Hart, once dismissed as too much, now headlining in front of thousands. I wore a custom navy suit that hugged every curve with unapologetic pride. My curls were pulled into a sleek bun. My heels. The same pair I couldn't afford 3 years ago. A gift to myself. For everything I had overcome. My speech wasn't about heartbreak. Or revenge. It was about reinvention. I talked about being underestimated. About being called difficult for asking for what you're worth. About being told to tone it down, wait your turn, be grateful. I talked about how many women are taught to shrink themselves, to make space for the fragile egos around them. And then I said, let them be uncomfortable. Let them choke on your glow. The room exploded. That night my DMs were flooded. Women from all over the world writing to say I'd given them the courage to finally launch that business, walk away from that relationship, or speak up in that meeting. And for the first time in a long time, I allowed myself to feel proud. Not just for surviving, but for rising. The next morning, I got a text from an unknown number. It was Bryce. "I watched your speech," it said. "You're incredible. I wish I had seen that version of you when we were together." I stared at the message, my phone glowing in my hand. That version of me had always been there. He just didn't bother to look. I didn't delete the text. I didn't reply either. Some things didn't need words anymore. My life had already said everything. Days later, I was walking through Bryant Park when a young woman stopped me. She said she followed me on Instagram. That she loved my recent quote. "The glow-up isn't to prove them wrong, it's to prove you were right all along." She asked for a picture. I said yes. As we posed, she whispered, "I left my boyfriend last month. He kept telling me I wasn't enough. You helped me remember that I always was." I smiled. That was what it was all about now. Not him. Not revenge. But becoming the woman who helped other women reclaim their light. And that was the best kind of win. There's a silence that follows success. Not the absence of sound, but the absence of doubt. The noise that once haunted me, every criticism, every eye roll, every "maybe this isn't for you," it had faded into irrelevance. Because I had become the woman they never thought I could be. My calendar was now booked months in advance. Speaking events, press interviews, private dinners with founders and changemakers. Women I once idolized now emailed me for advice. Brands offered six-figure deals to attach my name to their campaigns. I wasn't just in the room, I was the one people waited for before starting the meeting. And still, I never forgot where I came from. I made sure my team stayed grounded. We celebrated small wins just as fiercely as the big ones. We gave back. I sponsored scholarships in my mother's name. I funded business grants for women from underrepresented backgrounds. Because I knew what it felt like to have nothing but a vision, and a world that told you it wasn't enough. Bryce kept watching. I knew because every now and then I'd see his name pop up in the likes of my posts. He never commented. Never messaged again. But he was there. A silent spectator to the life he once tried to shrink. Part of me wondered if he had truly changed. If he had looked in the mirror and realized how deeply he'd failed, not just me but himself. Another part of me didn't care. Because by then I had stopped needing closure from people who never cared enough to offer it. Then one day I was invited to be honored at a gala for emerging visionaries in business. The theme was breaking barriers. It was a black-tie affair rooftop venue, strings of golden lights and floor-to-ceiling glass walls that reflected the Manhattan skyline. I wore an emerald gown that flowed like power itself. I didn't bring a date. I didn't need to. That night, as I was being introduced on stage, I noticed someone at the back of the room, standing half in the shadows. Bryce. He wasn't on the guest list. But he had found a way in. Maybe he had a friend on the inside. Maybe he used his old industry charm. Either way, he stood there watching as I was introduced as one of the most influential women in tech and strategy. I could feel his eyes on me the entire time I spoke. But I didn't look his way. After the ceremony, he approached me. Hesitant. As if he wasn't sure I'd acknowledge him. "Eliza," he said quietly. "You look incredible." I gave a polite smile. "Thank you. I meant what I said in my messages. I messed up. I didn't realize what I had until the world did," I finished for him. He nodded slowly. Yeah. There was a beat of silence between us. He looked like he wanted to say more. Like he hoped this was the part where I softened, offered him grace, maybe even a second chance. But I didn't. Instead I said, "You once told me I was hard to love. That my ambition got in the way. But it was never that I was hard to love. It was that you didn't know how to love someone who didn't need to be saved." His lips parted like he wanted to argue. But the words didn't come. I leaned in, voice calm. "I hope you find someone who challenges you to grow, not someone you try to control. Because that kind of love, it'll make you better. If you let it." And then I walked away. That was the last time I saw Bryce. He never tried to contact me again. Maybe he finally understood that he wasn't just a chapter one outgrew. He was a footnote in the story I wrote myself. Later that year, Forbes listed me as one of the top 30 women shaping the future. And not long after, I met someone, Miles. A man who didn't flinch when I succeeded. Who cheered when I won, held me when I faltered, and never once asked me to dim for his comfort. He loved all of me. And that's how I knew it was real. Because when a man loves your fire, he never tries to put it out. There's something almost poetic about becoming the woman they said you'd never be. After everything, after the silence, the rejection, the nights I cried into the collar of an oversized hoodie that smelled like failure, I found myself waking up in a sunlit apartment overlooking Central Park, barefoot on marble floors, sipping coffee from a mug that read, "Built, not given." My life wasn't perfect, but it was mine. Fully, fiercely mine. I had just signed a multi-million-dollar licensing deal. My consulting firm had expanded into Europe. I hired a full-time team, brought in interns from underrepresented communities, and launched a digital academy for young women in business. My inbox overflowed daily, not with rejections but with speaking requests, collaborations, thank you letters from women who said my story helped them stand a little taller. And yet, the most precious part of it all? Peace. I no longer rushed to prove my worth. I didn't shrink to fit. I no longer waited for someone to choose me. I had already chosen myself. I'd hear whispers sometimes, from people who once doubted me. From old classmates who couldn't believe the glow-up. From colleagues who once overlooked my ideas and now asked me for guidance. Some even tried to rewrite the past, acting like they always believed in me. Bryce. He faded from headlines and industry circles. I heard through a mutual friend that his last startup failed. Investors pulled out. Clients moved on. And the woman he tried to replace me with? She'd left. For someone else. Someone with real power. Real presence. The irony didn't escape me. One afternoon, I received a package at my office. No return address. Inside was a book, The Art of Letting Go. Tucked inside was a note and signed. You were always more than enough. I just couldn't see it then. I hope you're happy. There was no need to ask who sent it. I placed the book on a shelf beside my awards. Not out of sentiment, but as a reminder. A reminder that sometimes the closure you're waiting for is simply your own joy. The story didn't end with revenge. Or regret. It ended with rebirth. Because I learned that real power doesn't scream, it radiates. It doesn't break down doors, it builds new ones. And love, the kind that lasts, starts with the one you give yourself. I married Miles the following spring. It was a small ceremony, intimate, soft, honest. He stood beside me not because he needed me to be less, but because he adored all that I was. We wrote our own vows. And when I said I do, it wasn't just to him. It was to every piece of myself I once tried to hide. Now when I walk into a room, I don't wonder if I belong. I know I do. I became everything they said I couldn't. And the girl they once walked away from? She became unforgettable. Like, comment, share, and subscribe for more powerful stories that remind you, your pain is never the end. It's the beginning of your rise.